But Gould's suggestion, I think, presupposes that God has not guided and orchestrated the course of evolution, and hence can't be appealed to as a reason for supposing that he has not done so. Given the biological evidence and the proposition that God has indeed created human beings in his image, given those two things, Gould's suggestion is wholly implausible. For if the tape were rewound and let go forward again, no doubt God still would have intended that there be creatures created in his image, and would still have seen to it that there be such creatures. What about the fact that genetic mutations are said to be random? You might wonder whether genetic mutations could be both random and intended and caused by God. If these mutations are random, aren't they just a matter of chance, blind chance? But it is no part of current evolutionary theory to say that these mutations are random, in a sense implying that they are uncaused. They are said to be caused by cosmic rays, for example, and still less that they occur just by chance. According to Ernst Mayr, the dean of post-World War II biology, he says, when it is said that mutation or variation is random, the statement simply means that there is no correlation between the production of new genotypes and the adaptational needs of an organism in a given environment. Elliot Sober puts the point a bit more carefully, or maybe more fully. He says, there is no physical mechanism, either inside organisms or outside of them, that detects which mutations would be beneficial and causes those mutations to occur. The point is that a mutation accruing to an organism is random, just as neither the organism nor its environment contains a mechanism or process or organ that causes adaptive mutations to occur. But clearly a mutation could be both random in that sense and also intended and indeed caused by God. Hence, the randomness involved in Darwinism does not imply that the process is not divinely guided. The fact, if it is a fact, that human beings have come to be by way of natural selection, operating on random genetic mutation, is not at all incompatible with their having been designed by God and created in his image. Therefore, Darwinism is entirely compatible with God's guiding, orchestrating, and overseeing the whole process. Indeed, it's perfectly compatible with the idea that God causes the random genetic mutations that are winnowed by natural selection. Maybe all of them, maybe just some. Those who claim that evolution shows that humankind and other living things have not been designed apparently confuse a naturalistic gloss on the scientific theory with the theory itself. The claim that evolution demonstrates that human beings and other living creatures have not, contrary to appearances, been designed is not a part of or a consequence of the scientific theory as such, but a metaphysical or theological add-on. Naturalism implies, of course, that we human beings have not been designed and created in God's image, because it implies that there is no such person as God. But evolutionary science by itself does not carry this implication. Naturalism and evolutionary theory together imply the denial of divine design, but evolutionary theory by itself doesn't have that implication. It is only evolutionary science combined with naturalism that implies this denial. Since naturalism all by itself has this implication, it's no surprise that when you can join it with science, or as far as that goes, anything else, the complete works of William E. McGonagall, Poet and Tragedian, for example, or the Farmer's Almanac, or the Apostles' Creed, the conjunction will also have this implication. Section 2, broader anti-theistic arguments from evolution. So Darwinism as such doesn't include or imply the proposition that the process is unguided. What about broader anti-theistic arguments involving evolution? I'm aware of three sorts of arguments proposed here. First, there is the claim that evolution undercuts the argument from design, thus reducing the rational support, if any, enjoyed by theism. Second, there is the claim that the process of evolution, so wasteful and productive of suffering, is not the sort of process God would use or permit. And thirdly, there is the thought that unguided evolution, as a hypothesis, is superior to the hypothesis that the process of evolution has been guided or orchestrated by mind, divine or otherwise, because it is simpler and more optimistic. None of these objections, I believe, is promising. While I can't deal properly, really, with any of them, let alone all of them, in the time I have, I'll briefly outline a response to each. Start with a claim that evolution undercuts the argument from design, thus making it less reasonable to accept theistic belief. According to John Dupre, quote, Darwinism undermines the only remotely plausible reason for believing in the existence of God, that is, the argument from design. Now, it's reasonable to think that evolution makes it somewhat easier to be rational or sensible in accepting atheism. Prior to 1859, there simply weren't decent answers to the question, if this abundant variety of life wasn't created by God, how did it get here? And in this connection, Richard Dawkins says Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. But making it easier to be a rational atheist doesn't as such make it harder to be a rational theist, and doesn't as such create a religion-science conflict. And how much support does the argument from design actually offer theistic belief anyway? Perhaps it suggests belief in the existence of a very powerful, very knowledgeable being or group of beings, but that's a long ways from theism. In any event, however, current molecular biology may offer the materials for a different sort of argument from design, as explained in the much maligned Michael Behe's recent book, The Edge of Evolution. Michael Behe is indeed much maligned. His argument is one of the few serious and quantitative arguments in this area. We have the living cell, both prokaryotic and eukaryotic, with its stupefying complexity and its multitude of elaborately complex protein machines. Behe argues that unguided natural selection is probably incapable of producing these protein machines. His argument is quantitative and empirical rather than a priori. Its centerpiece is the saga of the malaria parasite, Plasmodium falciparum, and its long trench warfare with the human genome. I don't have the space here to outline this argument, but to me as a layman, the argument seems reasonably powerful, though very far from conclusive. If Behe is right, or anywhere nearly right, the probability of the existence of the cell as we find it is much greater on theism than on naturalism. And if this is so, the argument from design is reinstated at a different level, at a deeper level. What current biological science takes away with one hand, it restores with the other. But the real point lies in a different direction. Belief in God is seldom accepted on the basis of the teleological argument, or indeed any argument or propositional evidence at all. Both untutored observation and current research in the scientific study of religion suggest that a tendency to believe in God or something very much like God, apart from any propositional evidence, is part of our native cognitive endowment. Furthermore, if theistic belief is true, it probably doesn't require propositional evidence for its rational acceptability. As I argued in this book, Warranted Christian Belief, if theistic belief is true, then very likely it has both rationality and warrant in the basic way, that is, not on the basis of propositional evidence. If theistic belief is true, then very likely there is a cognitive structure, something like John Calvin's sensus divinitatis, an original source of warranted theistic belief. In this way, belief in God, like belief in other minds, has its own source of rationality and warrant, and doesn't depend on arguments from other sources for these estimable qualities. The demise of the teleological argument, if indeed evolution has compromised it, is perhaps a little more of a threat to rational belief in God than the demise of the argument from analogy for other minds is to rational belief in other minds.